Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the Cipher Brief studio. I'm Tom Nagorski for a conversation today about Germany and some of the remarkable changes that have happened in that country over the last couple of months. And I think safe to say all or close to all of them a result of major changes that have emanated from Washington in that same period. The shift towards Moscow, the shift away from Europe. We've been talking about that with many people. But we'll focus today on Germany, and helping us to unpack some of that is Liana Fix, who was with us not too long ago when, on the day after the German elections, Liana Fix is a fellow for Europe at the Council on Foreign Relations, an expert on Germany. Liana, great to have you back with us. And I wonder, just to start, for the viewer or listener who has not paid daily attention to the news from Berlin and the rest of the country, tick off, if you would, just some of the what I said in the open, some of the major things that have happened in terms of kind of sea changes in Germany.
So we had elections in Germany by the end of February, and not surprisingly, the Conservatives under Friedrich Merz, the successor of Angela Merkel, have won those elections. They were looking for coalition partners in the weeks after and have so far found the Social Democrats as potential coalition partners. Now, what you would expect from Germany is that these coalitions take a long time, these coalition negotiations, and they will take a long time. But surprisingly for the German context, big decisions were already announced before the coalition was even agreed upon. So the potential coalition partners already agreed just at the beginning of talks to do two things which really catapulted Germany out of its spending break that it had for a long time and puts it back on the map of European and transatlantic security. So what did they agree on? They agreed to, first, that Germany will loosen its debt break, which is its famous debt break that it can't spend more than 0.35 of GDP, and for defense spending.
Right.
So everything above 1% of defense spending can be financed by debt. That means Germany has basically unlimited defense spending in the future. There's no ceiling. As much defense spending as Germany wants can be covered by debt. Plus a second package for infrastructure reforms, which the Social Democrats wanted to have. But here, that is the big news of these first week of coalition talks, knowing feeling the urgency from Washington, D.C., feeling the urgency from the threat from Russia. German coalition partners and leaders agreed very early on a historic change in Germany's debt break and an historic change for German defense spending.
So those two things together, the debt break going away and the defense spending push, I mean, these are things that have been in place ever since the early years of the post-war era, right?
So the debt break is a little bit young. The debt break was introduced in the basic law in Germany's constitution in 2009 by the Conservatives, which is why they, under Angela Merkel, always said, we are not going to touch the debt break. This is for the future generation so that they don't grow up with an indebted Germany. But now there's a consensus that at least for defense spending, not for everything else, but at least for defense spending, the debt break will be paused, allowing Germany, again, unlimited defense spending.
Yeah. Now, that's a blank check then for the new chancellor, the new government. And by the way, he's not even chancellor yet, right?
He is not.
And he has said, many things about this. He had that famous quote on the election night, we have to prepare for real independence from the United States. He's also said more recently that when it comes to boosting Germany's defenses, its armed forces, I think the phrase he used, I don't know the German, whatever it takes, right? So what does this mean? Because again, as you said, it's been a fiscally conservative country under all governments, and it has been, when it comes to military spending, just not a big spender. So how do you go from that to whatever it takes?
So whatever it takes is a quote actually from the Italian Mario Draghi, who was the head of the European Central Bank during the financial crisis. And when all investors were betting against the euro, he said, no, whatever it takes, and basically saved the euro. So taking this as a quote shows in what historic dimensions German leaders are thinking about this, comparing themselves with this historic occasion under Draghi. The impression is that the sea change that Olaf Scholz, the former German chancellor, has announced after Russia's invasion of Ukraine was just too small. He proposed a special fund, but nothing really came out of that to the extent that allies hoped Germany would emerge as a crucial provider of European security. There were some holes patched, but not the big move that people expected. But what did it need for Germany to move? A second shock and a bigger shock. And the second and the bigger shock was the US elections, were the statements by Donald Trump, leading to a situation where Germany, which has always been reliant on the West, it had always positioned its foreign policy after 1945 on the United States, on the West, suddenly sees itself as, well, we don't even know if the West still exists, so perhaps this is now the time to invest in defense spending beyond 2% and to assume a role in European security.
Recognizing excellence in national security, the Cipher Brief Honors Dinner celebrates those who've made a real difference in protecting our nation. It's an unforgettable evening with top leaders in the field. Join us in honoring these remarkable contributions. Reserve your seat now at cipherbriefhonors.com.
This is probably a harder question to answer because we don't know where this is headed. I know that Germany has existing deals with American arms manufacturers that are in the pipeline, but I also see one of the things, and I guess it makes sense, the best stock you could have bought a couple of months ago anywhere in the world might have been a German arms manufacturer. Is the idea here not only to, reboost your stockpiles from whatever, but to do most of it or more of it in German industry?
So we don't know exactly yet what the plans are from the new German government, because although they agreed to this end of the debt brake on defense spending, they have not yet said how much defense spending they actually want. So other countries like Sweden and others have gone ahead and said 3.5 is our goal, which obviously with a view to the NATO summit in The Hague at the end of June makes sense. But there's no announcement yet how much Germany will actually want to spend and take on in debt. And also it's not yet clear where this money is going to be invested. But if you would ask me to make a guess, there will be a very delicate balance between continuing contracts with the United States, just to keep the US on board for as long as possible, to buy time, goodwill in the White House, and at the same time trying to invest more in the European defense industrial base, because that has been very clearly diagnosed as lacking the necessary means and investments to make Europe perhaps not independent from the United States, but at least stronger than it is now.
Yeah. Now, however much money is freed up now, can it really be a blank check for the military? I mean, there are existing economic problems in Germany. Those might lead to political problems. I realize I'm asking you to look into the future a little bit here, but we shouldn't think necessarily that this means that all of a sudden Germany will just triple the size of its armed forces and buy right? I mean, they're not going to be able to, I would imagine, politically or economically, fill all those gaps in a short period, right?
And also just logistically, so procurement is in Germany as much as a problem, if not bigger, than in the United States. It takes forever to order something, right, to actually use the money that you have available. Then the German Bundeswehr is not particularly attractive. It's not the US Army, and it has been reduced in size, and it has suffered a lot of restrictions in the past years. So Germany actually wants to have an army of 200,000, but right now it's around 180,000. It's incredibly difficult to recruit further soldiers. So there's a whole package of contextual factors, which it's just not enough to throw money at the problem. But of course, it helps, right? So what we should expect is that Germany will somewhere find itself in a landing zone of 3.5% ahead of the NATO summit in The Hague. And we already see very clearly that this is what NATO members are going to pitch to Donald Trump in The Hague.
Yeah, so that's a good moment, Liana, to just step back and look at all of Europe. It seems hardly a day goes by, and certainly a week doesn't go by, without either a new meeting or a new pledge, or you just mentioned Sweden, a new country that says, we're going to spend this much, we're going to buy this weapon system. To what extent can you say, beyond all those headlines, how confident should people be, if they are so inclined to think that it's a good thing for Europe to build up and fill these gaps? How confident are you that Europeans can do so?
Well, it is a long-term project, and I think that's the honest answer that European politicians also have to give to their citizens. It will take at least 5 to 10 years of massive defense spending, massive buying, investment in European defense industrial base, until Europeans are able to fill a vacuum left by the United States. So the honest answer would be, well, we will live in a period of reduced security in Europe in case Donald Trump withdraws from NATO or continues to be perceived as an unreliable actor by the Europeans, and at the same time the Russia threat continues. So this is not a happy message, right? Because no government stretches over 5 to 10 years. It's actually a tough message to communicate to your people that, look, we are investing, we're trying to do this, but there's a real risk that it takes too long and that a crisis might take place in between those, within those 5 to 10 years. And the other question that Europeans have to answer, do they want to take a strategic decision now? Do they want to put all of their eggs now in the Europe basket, all of the eggs in the US basket, or wouldn't it be wiser to wait to have some strategic patience here? Because again, keeping the US at Europe's side for as long as possible until it's really confirmed that it's not possible anymore would buy Europeans time, and the strategic decision they still can take later. Now they really need to invest.
Yeah. Now, I know you're the Europe Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. You are not the military or defense fellow, but I also know you know a lot about it. What are, just in terms of, what are the things, the military, the weapon systems and so forth, that you think will be most challenging for the Europeans, not necessarily the Germans, to replace, again, if they no longer get those things from the United States?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things, and we've seen that, for example, in the Libya campaign in, when was that, 2011, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes.
where Europeans really relied on the United States. Strategic enablers that the United States provided to keep everyone going logistically in the battlefield, to provide fuel, to refuel while flying, and so on. That was missing. And the other part that is a huge vacuum is air defense, especially Patriots from the United States. Air defense is very high in demand now in Europe. We have some other countries that are producing air defense system, Norway, for example. But many of the Patriots, and especially of the missiles, have also been given to Ukraine right now. So that's going to be a huge gap that Europeans will need to fill.
Yeah. Last question, Liana. We've talked to people from around the world on this platform recently in this same time period. And I always try to ask a more personal question about, I know you're in the United States now, but just how you receive this kind of, I don't know, barrage of statements, news that we've been talking about from the new administration in Washington. What it's like to read and consume all that, in your case as a European.
Yeah, I think what keeps Europeans really on their toes is the continuous sequence of shocks that they receive, right? From the Munich Security Conference and the speech of the Vice President sort of making an ideological claim about Europe, to Zelensky-Trump meeting in the White House, and now to the new tariffs that have been announced. Yeah. So that is really something which makes it difficult for Europeans to lean back and to pause for a moment, to think, oh, perhaps it's not as bad as we thought, and perhaps, things are still more normal than we think they are. On the one hand, that's obviously, overwhelming, this continuous series of shocks for Europeans. But on the other hand, it's also good because it keeps the pressure going, right? So if it's difficult for Europeans to come together, this is not a nation state, and to agree on security and defense, but a continuous shock from the US does help to keep up the urgency. Of course, I would wish that the relationship would be in a better shape, but at least we'll hopefully see some positive outcomes of that for Europe.
Yeah, focuses the mind, I guess.
Absolutely.
All right, Liana Fix, thank you so much again for being with
Thank you,
us.
Tom.
And we look forward to talking again in the future. Liana Fix from the Council on Foreign Relations. Thanks again.
Thanks so much.